The day I took over his company was the same day he married my ex-wife. And the worst part? He had no idea I was the reason his business was collapsing. A year earlier, she walked out on me with 2 suitcases, and a man who thought I was nothing. I never thought I'd end up being the guy with a story about proving myself. My name's Ethan Carter. A few years ago, I was just another programmer with big dreams and an even bigger mortgage in a small town in Florida. I had a wife, Laura. At least I thought she was the love of my life. A small apartment packed with computer gear, and a startup idea that kept me awake most nights. "Ethan, we need to talk," Laura said one evening while I was hunched over my keyboard, putting the final touches on what I believed was game-changing software. I barely glanced up. "Just 5 more minutes, honey. I'm almost there with this code." "No, now." Her voice had a sharp edge I hadn't heard before. When I finally turned around, she was standing there with 2 suitcases. Not 1, 2. And she was dressed like she was going somewhere that mattered. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. Laura placed a manila envelope on the coffee table. "Divorce papers. I've already signed them." The room felt like it tilted. "Divorce? Laura, what are you talking about? We can work through whatever this is." She laughed, but it wasn't the laugh I fell in love with. This one was cold, almost cruel. "Work through it, Ethan? We've been working through it for 3 years. I'm done living like this. Done with promises that your big break is right around the corner. Done clipping coupons and buying cheap groceries while my friends are off vacationing in Europe." I stood up, my project instantly forgotten. "Laura, I'm close. So close. This platform could change everything for us." "That's what you said about the last 3 projects." She crossed her arms. "I've met someone else." Those 4 words hit me like a punch to the chest. "Who?" I managed to get out. "Victor Hale." At first, the name didn't land. And then it did. Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Enterprises, one of the biggest tech companies on the East Coast. I'd read about him in tech magazines, imagined pitching my ideas to his company someday. "The Victor Hale?" I asked. "How did you even meet him?" Laura looked away, a faint flush creeping onto her face. "I applied for an executive assistant job at his company 6 months ago. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd take it as me not believing in your work." "Several months." My voice cracked. "You've been seeing him for 6 months?" "It didn't start like that," she said quickly. "But yes, we've been together for about 4 months now. And Ethan, he can give me the life I want. The life you promised me when we got married." I felt like I was sinking. So all those late nights at work, I was with Richard, and his world, it's everything I've ever wanted. He has a penthouse in New York, a vacation home in a luxury coastal property. He flies private. Ethan. Private. Her eyes lit up, and that's when it hit me. I was looking at someone I didn't recognize anymore. "And what about love?" I asked quietly. "Do you love him?" Laura hesitated just long enough to tell me everything before she answered. "I'm learning to, but what I do know for sure is, I don't love this life anymore." She gestured around our small apartment. "I don't love watching you waste your potential on dreams that never go anywhere." "Waste my potential, Laura? I've been building something revolutionary." "You've been hiding from reality," she snapped. "Real successful people don't lock themselves in apartments in a small town in Florida. They're out in New York, in Silicon Valley, making connections, actually making things happen." I just stood there, stunned by the bitterness in her voice. "So that's it? After 5 years of marriage, you're just walking out?" "Richard is waiting for me downstairs." She checked her watch. "I'll be staying at his place in the city until the divorce is finalized. My lawyer will reach out about dividing assets. Though there's not much to divide, is there?" The way she looked at me, full of contempt, it actually hurt. "Laura, please," I said, hating how desperate I sounded. "Just give me a chance to show you. The platform's almost ready. I've got investor meetings next week." "I've heard it all before, Ethan. And even if you somehow pull it off this time, it's too late for us." She grabbed her suitcases. "Richard knows people. Real investors, not the small-time angels you've been chasing. He could have helped you, but you were too proud to even consider asking. I wanted to make it on my own merit. And look where that got you. Where it got us. She shook her head. Just sign the papers, Ethan. Don't drag this out. As she moved toward the door, a bad thought hit me. Did you tell him about my platform? About the algorithms I've been working on? Laura paused, her back still to me. Richard was interested. He asked questions. I might have shared some details. That did it. The betrayal was complete. Not only was she leaving me for another man, but she might have just put years of my work at risk. You had no right, I said, my voice turning firm. That was proprietary information. She turned, and for a moment, I thought I saw a hint of regret, but it faded fast. It doesn't matter, Ethan. Even if your idea is as good as you think, Richard has the resources to build it better and faster. That's reality. Get out, I said quietly. Gladly. She opened the door. Oh, and Ethan? Richard says there are many people like you in this industry. Ideas don't mean anything without the capital and connections behind them. You should remember that. And then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint smell of her perfume and the divorce papers on my coffee table. I stood there for what felt like hours, my world falling apart around me. Then I walked into the kitchen and pulled out the bottle we'd been saving for something special. This wasn't what we had planned, but it felt right. After a few drinks, I was numb enough to think straight. Laura hadn't just broken my heart. She'd put my whole future at risk. If Stanton used my algorithms, years of work could be worthless. I'd be competing against my own creation, backed by one of the biggest tech companies on the East Coast. I called my friend Daniel Brooks, who worked in IP law. She told him what? Daniel Brooks said after I explained everything. Ethan, that's a serious breach of confidentiality. Did she sign an NDA when you started developing this? No, I admitted. She's my wife. Was my wife. I didn't think I needed one. Rookie mistake, Daniel Brooks said. But it's not over. Document everything when you started, what you built, timestamps of your code. If Stanton releases anything close to your platform, we can still make a case. That could mean years in court, I said. Against a company with endless money. One step at a time, Daniel Brooks replied. First, finish your platform. Get it out there. Establish yourself. Then we deal with Stanton. After we hung up, I looked around the apartment. Felt too empty, too quiet. Laura's words kept echoing in my head. Men like you are a dime a dozen. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just finish the platform. I'd make it better than anything Victor Hale could come up with. And then I'd hold him accountable for taking my wife and trying to take my future. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a heavy sense of purpose. The divorce papers were still on the table. They could wait. I had bigger things to deal with. On the fourth day of a coding marathon fueled by caffeine and anger, my doorbell rang. A courier handed me a package from Hale Enterprises. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a polite but condescending letter mentioning similarities between my work and their upcoming platform. I stared at the check, anger building in my chest. $50,000. That's what Victor Hale thought my years of work were worth. That's the price he put on my ideas and my life. I tore the check into pieces, then grabbed my phone. James, I said when my investor answered. I'm ready to show you the platform. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. 2 days later, I sat across from Andrew Cole, a veteran tech investor known for taking chances on unusual startups. I had worked through the night to get the demo ready, pushing myself past exhaustion to make sure everything was right. So, Ethan, James said after we exchanged a few words, Laura won't be joining us? She usually sits in on these meetings. I hadn't told many people about the divorce yet. No, we're separated. James raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry to hear that. Recent? Very? I said, clearing my throat. But it won't affect the project. If anything, I'm more committed than ever to making this work. I see. James studied me for a moment. Well, let's see what you've got. I launched into my presentation, explaining how my predictive analytics platform could process unstructured data faster and more accurately than anything currently on the market. As I walked him through the software, I could see his interest growing. "This is impressive, Ethan," he said when I finished. "But I've heard rumors that Hale Enterprises is working on something similar, set to launch within the next quarter." My heart dropped. Richard was moving fast. "Mine is better," I said firmly, "and I can prove it." "How?" "Give me access to a data set. Any data set. Let me show you what this platform can do in real time." James thought for a second, then pulled out his phone. After a short call, he had his assistant email over a massive dataset from one of his portfolio companies, customer behavior patterns they hadn't been able to analyze properly. "Show me what you can do with this," he said. I loaded the data into my platform, set the parameters, and let the algorithms run. Within minutes, patterns started to appear, clear correlations and predictive insights that would have taken weeks to uncover using traditional methods. James leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. "That's remarkable. This is just the start," I said. "With the right funding, I can push this even further." By the end of the meeting, he wasn't just interested, he was genuinely excited. "I'm ready to offer $2 million in seed funding for 15% equity," he said. "But you need to move fast. If Stanton beats you to market." "They won't," I cut in. "And James, I need something else." "What's that?" "Connections. I need introductions to the right people, not just for the business but to build a presence. I want the tech world to know who's behind this platform." James smiled. "That, Ethan, might be even more valuable than the money. Consider it done." As I walked out of his office with a signed term sheet, I felt something I hadn't felt since Laura left. Hope. And something else too, the first hint of a plan that went beyond just succeeding. A plan to take everything from Victor Hale, the same way he'd taken everything from me. Over the next 3 months, I barely left my apartment, except for meetings with James and people in his network. I renamed the company Carter Analytics, incorporated it in Delaware, and put together a small but sharp team of developers to help refine the platform. The divorce went through without much trouble. Laura didn't want anything from what little we had, clearly sure that her future with Richard would give her everything she needed. I signed the papers without really reading them. My focus was already somewhere else. Several months after Laura walked out, Carter Analytics launched at a major tech conference, and the response was incredible. James had coached me through everything. My pitch, my presence, even how I looked. The wrinkled t-shirts and rough stubble were gone, replaced with fitted shirts and a cleaner look that still felt true to a startup founder. 3 major clients signed on the spot, impressed by what the platform could do. By the end of the conference, we had a full waiting list for our beta and interest from several big firms for our Series A. Then came the news we'd been waiting for. Hale Enterprises announced a delay in their analytics platform, blaming technical issues. Word going around was their algorithms just weren't working the way they expected. I knew exactly why. They tried to piece together my ideas from what Laura had told them, but without the full picture, they ran into problems they couldn't solve. The core innovations were still mine. James called me the next day. "You did it, kid. Stanton's struggling, and you're the one everyone's talking about. But now you've got a choice. Do you want to grow steady or go big?" "Big," I said without thinking. "I want to scale this nationally, starting with New York." Shortly after, Carter Analytics opened a clean, modern office in New York City, just 10 blocks from Hale Enterprises headquarters. That wasn't by accident. I wanted Richard to know I was right there, in his space. From that point on, I became obsessed with growth, working nonstop and pushing my team just as hard. Our Series A round brought in a major funding round, and we scaled at a pace that scared our competitors. I transformed myself completely. Not just the company, me. The awkward programmer disappeared, replaced by someone who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. My new downtown Manhattan address, tailored wardrobe, and growing confidence weren't just for show. They were tools I was sharpening for the confrontation I knew was coming. I dated strategically high-profile women who showed up in society pages Laura definitely read. I wanted her to see exactly what she had walked away from. Less than a year after launch, Carter Analytics had grown to a team of 50, with a client list that included Fortune 500 companies and a valuation approaching hundreds of millions valuation. We were directly competing with Hale Enterprises, and more often than not, we were winning. Then came the moment I had been both dreading and waiting for, an invitation to speak at the annual Tech Innovation Summit, where Victor Hale was also scheduled to present. Same stage, same day. The night before the summit, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window of my hotel suite, looking out over the New York City skyline, going over what I'd say if we came face to face. Would he even know who I was? Had Laura told him about her ex-husband's company? The next morning, I arrived early, sat through the opening keynotes, and waited for my turn. Richard was scheduled to speak right after me. A decision that couldn't have been more perfect if I'd arranged it myself. When I stepped on stage, the room was packed. I launched into my presentation, explaining how Carter Analytics was transforming predictive data analysis across industries. The audience stayed engaged, asking sharp, thoughtful questions. And then, as I started wrapping up, I saw him, Victor Hale, standing at the back of the room, watching me with a slight frown. Next to him stood Laura, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw the shock hit her. She hadn't expected this version of me. Confident, successful, completely in control. I finished to strong applause, and as I stepped down, the moderator announced, "And now, please welcome Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Enterprises." We passed each other on the steps. Up close, Richard looked older than his photos, silver at the temples, a deep tan like someone who spent weekends on a yacht. He was taller than me, broader, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. "Impressive presentation," he said, offering his hand. Victor Hale. I took it, gripping maybe a little harder than I needed to. Ethan Carter, Carter Analytics. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, quickly shifting into something more measured. Miller, any relation to Olivia Carter? So she had kept my name. Interesting. Ex-husband, I said calmly. Small world. Before he could respond, the moderator called him again, and he had to step on stage. I walked to the back where Laura stood still, her face pale. "Hello, Laura," I said quietly. "You look well." "Ethan," she said, stumbling a little. I had no idea you'd be here." "Clearly," I said with a small smile. "Enjoying the summit? The presentations have been interesting." She glanced toward the stage where Richard had started speaking. "You've changed. Success will do that." "I meant to reach out," she said quickly, "after I heard about your company. To congratulate you." "Did you?" I kept my tone light. "Well, better late than never." She lowered her voice. "Does Richard know who you are? Who you really are?" "He does now," I said, nodding toward the stage. "But don't worry, I didn't mention how helpful you were, sharing my early algorithms with his team. That can stay between us." She went pale. "Ethan, that wasn't... I didn't mean... Didn't think it would matter," I said quietly. "Because I was just a small-time programmer who wasn't going anywhere." I shrugged. Water under the bridge now. On stage, Richard was struggling. His presentation didn't have the same energy or edge as mine, and the audience could feel it. The questions were tougher, and the engagement just wasn't there. "Your husband seems to be having a rough time up there," I observed. "Hale Enterprises has had a few setbacks lately, from what I hear." Laura's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing, Ethan?" "Building a successful company. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "You know what I mean. Are you deliberately targeting Richard's business?" I gave a soft laugh. "Paranoid, aren't we? The tech world is competitive. May the best platform win." Richard finished his presentation to polite but restrained applause. As he walked back toward us, I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Darling," he said to Laura, barely acknowledging me. "We should get going. We have that dinner." "Of course." Laura took his arm, but her eyes stayed on me. It was unexpected seeing you, Ethan. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other, I said evenly. New York's a small town in some ways. Richard gave me a brief nod. Miller, good luck with your startup. Oh, we're well past the startup phase, I corrected him. But thank you, and good luck with your, what did the press call it? Technical challenges. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing, guiding Laura away through the crowd. As I watched them leave, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. This was just the beginning. The confrontation at the Tech Innovation Summit marked a turning point. Within weeks, the industry was buzzing with comparisons between Carter Analytics and Hale Enterprises, with most favoring the newcomer. Our valuation climbed while theirs began a slow decline. I pushed the momentum, driving more aggressive expansion, targeting Stanton's key clients with demonstrations that clearly showed the strength of our platform. We poached 3 of their top developers, and they brought valuable insight into Stanton's technical problems. My profile rose along with the company. I was featured in major business media outlets, appeared on major business media outlets, and was profiled in the Wall Street Journal. I made sure each piece mentioned my beginnings in a small town in Florida and how Carter Analytics started from scratch. A quiet contrast to Victor Hale's Silver Spoon background. Several months after the summit, we secured a contract with Global Finance Partners, one of Hale Enterprises' oldest and most profitable clients. The day the news broke, our stock jumped a minority stake, and I received a text from an unknown number. This isn't a game you want to play. Back off. I saved the number but didn't reply. The message told me enough. Victor Hale was feeling the pressure. Shortly after, I attended a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As I moved through the crowd with a glass of champagne, I spotted Laura standing alone near a Greek statue, looking unsettled. "Penny for your thoughts," I said as I approached. She startled slightly. "Ethan, you seem to be everywhere these days. It's that kind of town." I glanced around. "No Richard tonight?" "He's dealing with something at the office." She took a sip of champagne. "Something you might know about. Global Finance Partners, maybe?" I smiled slightly. "They made a business decision, Laura. Nothing personal." "It feels personal." She lowered her voice. "What do you want, Ethan? Revenge? Is that what this is about?" "This is about building the best company I can," I said calmly. "If that happens to affect your husband's business, well, competition is healthy, isn't it?" She studied me closely. "You've become exactly what you used to criticize. Ruthless, obsessed with success, willing to step on others to get ahead." "I learned from the best." I gestured around the room. "Isn't this what you wanted? The galas, the recognition, the success? I'm just giving you a chance to see what it would have been like if you had stayed." "That's cruel," she whispered. "Crueler than walking out on your husband right before his big break? Crueler than sharing his proprietary work with a competitor?" I kept my tone calm, almost gentle. "I don't think so." She flinched. "Richard and I are getting married," she said suddenly. "Next month. At the plaza." I raised an eyebrow. "Congratulations. I'm sure it will be beautiful. I want you to stop this, whatever you're doing, as a wedding gift." I let out a quiet laugh. "Who's being cruel now?" I shook my head slightly. "No, Laura. I'm just getting started." She grabbed my arm. "Richard is dangerous when he's cornered. Ethan, you don't know what he's capable of." "Neither does he know what I'm capable of." I gently removed her hand. "Enjoy the rest of your evening. Give my best to the groom." As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A message from my CFO. *, "We need to talk. Stanton's making moves. *. The game was escalating. The next morning, I found out exactly what those moves were. Hale Enterprises had filed a lawsuit against Carter Analytics, claiming intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. The irony was almost funny. "They have nothing," Daniel Brooks said after reviewing the filing. "This is a desperation move, meant to scare your investors and slow you down. Can we counter?" I asked. "With pleasure," Daniel Brooks said, smiling. We'll file a countersuit claiming Stanton's delayed analytics platform is based on your work, shared without authorization during your marriage to Laura. That would pull her into it, I said. Does that bother you? I thought for a second. No. She made her choice. The legal fight made headlines, adding fuel to the already intense rivalry between the two companies. Our stock dipped at first, but recovered quickly after several analysts questioned Stanton's claims and praised Carter Analytics' innovation. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, I received an invitation. Thick cream paper, gold embossing. Asterisk Mr. and Mrs. Victor Hale request the pleasure of your company at their wedding. Asterisk. Inside was a handwritten note from Laura. Asterisk Ethan, I'd love for you to see what real success looks like. No hard feelings. L asterisk. I just stared at it. The audacity of it was almost unreal. Was this some kind of twisted peace offering? Or a calculated move to show me that, lawsuit or not, they thought they were untouchable? Either way, it gave me an opportunity one couldn't ignore. I RSVP'd. Asterisk Ethan Carter +1 will attend. Asterisk. Then I called my investment team. I want everything on Hale Enterprises, financials, board members, shareholders, outstanding debt. Everything. Are we talking acquisition? My CFO asked. Something like that. What we uncovered was interesting. Behind the image of success, Hale Enterprises was stretched thin. Richard had been taking risks, expanding too fast, and the company was more vulnerable than it looked. The lawsuit against us. Likely a distraction. With the right timing, a takeover was possible. I started quietly buying shares through shell companies and different investment channels. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to build a position. At the same time, I began talking to key board members and institutional investors, planting doubts about Richard's leadership. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got another text from Richard's number. Asterisk, I know what you're doing. Back off now or I'll destroy everything you've built. Asterisk. I forwarded it to Daniel Brooks with one line. Asterisk, more evidence for our harassment counterclaim. Asterisk. The next day, Hale Enterprises held a surprise press conference. Richard stood in front of cameras, looking confident, announcing a bold new direction, pivoting into artificial intelligence and machine learning, areas where Carter Analytics hadn't yet made a strong push. The market reacted fast. Stanton stock jumped 8%. My phone rang right away. Did you see that? James asked. He's trying to outmaneuver you. Let him try, I said calmly. He's too late. The week before the wedding, we made our move. Carter Analytics announced a tender offer for Hale Enterprises shares, at a premium too attractive for shareholders to ignore. The business world was stunned. A 3-year-old company going after one that had been around for decades. But what they didn't know, we already controlled nearly a significant stake off the shares, and we had commitments lined up to push us past controlling stake. The takeover was aggressive and strategic. Richard called me himself, his voice tight with anger. You can't do this. The board won't allow it. The board doesn't have a choice, I said calmly. And neither do you. This is about Laura, isn't it? He snapped. All of this. Because she chose me over you. This is business, Richard. You tried to steal my work, threaten me, and sue my company. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? I'll fight this, he vowed. With everything I have. You don't have much left, I said. But hey, look on the bright side. You've still got the wedding to look forward to. Speaking of that, I'm looking forward to meeting your board members in a more social setting. I hung up before he could say anything back. The timing wasn't an accident. I wanted Richard distracted, off balance, and embarrassed right before his big day. But I wasn't trying to stop the wedding. No, I absolutely wanted it to happen because I still had one more card to play. The morning of the wedding came bright and clear. I dressed with care in a custom Tom Ford suit, put on a platinum PC Philippe watch, a recent indulgence, and had my driver take me to the plaza. My +1 was Sophie Bennett, my VP of operations. Not a romantic date, but a sharp businesswoman who understood exactly what today was really about. Remember? I told her as we pulled up to the hotel. We're not here to make a scene. We're here to observe. Sophie Bennett nodded. And to be observed. The Plaza Ballroom had been turned into a floral dream, with white orchids and roses everywhere. A string quartet played softly while guests in designer clothes drifted through the room. I recognized faces from magazine covers and business news. Richard had invited the very top of New York society. When Laura walked down the aisle in a Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than our first apartment, I felt nothing. No anger, no loss, not even satisfaction about what was coming. Just a strange detachment, like I was watching a movie about somebody else's life. Richard smiled at his bride, looking every bit the successful businessman in his custom tuxedo. He didn't notice me sitting quietly in the middle row, and he didn't seem to realize that several of his board members kept checking their phones with nervous expressions. The ceremony was brief and tasteful. They exchanged vows, the rings came out on a silk pillow, and they sealed it all with a kiss while the guests applauded. I clapped politely right along with everyone else. It was at the reception when things started to come apart. Richard and Laura were making their rounds, taking congratulations, when Richard's phone buzzed. He looked at it, frowned, and stepped away. A few minutes later, he came back looking pale. I sipped my champagne and watched him lean in and whisper something urgent to one of his executives. Then more phones started buzzing. The business crowd at the wedding was beginning to realize something was wrong. And then Richard saw me. Our eyes locked from across the room, and I lifted my glass in a silent toast. The confusion on his face quickly turned to shock as recognition hit him, followed by something much darker. He started toward me, but another board member cut him off and showed him something on a tablet. The color drained completely from Richard's face. The news was out. Carter Analytics had successfully acquired a controlling interest in Hale Enterprises. Effective immediately, the board would be restructured, with me as the new chairman. In other words, I now owned Richard's company. Laura, still wrapped up in the glow of being a bride, seemed completely unaware of the business disaster unfolding around her. She kept talking with guests, showing off her ring, and accepting compliments on the ceremony. I decided it was time to offer my personal congratulations. "Laura, you look beautiful," I said as I walked up to her with a warm smile. She turned, and the shock on her face was almost unbelievable. "Ethan, I didn't think you'd actually come. And miss your big day? Never." I kissed her on the cheek, catching the same expensive perfume she'd worn the day she left. Marriage is a serious commitment, almost as serious as business. Her eyes narrowed just a little. "What are you doing here, Ethan? Really?" "I was invited." I lifted my hands innocently. "And I wanted to see how the other half lives." "Very impressive." She looked me over, taking in the suit, the watch, the confidence that hadn't been there before. "You've changed. Success will do that. I heard your company was doing well." She glanced across the room. "Is that your date? She's pretty." "Sophie Bennett. She's my VP of operations. Brilliant woman." I smiled. "Speaking of operations, have you checked on your husband? He looks a little distracted." Laura frowned and glanced across the room, where Richard was now surrounded by a tight circle of tense men in suits. "What's going on over there?" "Just some business news breaking. Nothing that should ruin your special day." I took another slow sip of champagne. "Tell me, Laura, are you happy? Did you get everything you wanted?" She blinked, clearly thrown by the question. "Of course I am. Richard gives me everything I could ever ask for." "Everything has a price," I said evenly. "I learned that from you." Before she could answer, Richard stepped up beside her, his face tight with barely contained anger. "Laura, we need to talk. Now." "Richard, what's wrong? It's our wedding reception." "Ask him," Richard snapped, glaring straight at me. I calmly held out my hand. "Victor Hale. We've never formally met, but I feel like I know you. Congratulations on the marriage." He ignored my hand completely. "You planned this. Today of all days." "Planned what?" Laura looked between us, confused. "He's taken over the company," Richard said through clenched teeth. A hostile takeover, announced right in the middle of our wedding. Laura's eyes widened as she turned to me. You did what? I gave a small shrug. Business is business. Timing matters. Isn't that what you told me? Richard? Through Laura, of course. You? Laura hissed under her breath. Not here. Everyone's watching. And they were. The elegant reception had shifted into something else entirely. Guests were whispering, pointing, checking their phones as the news spread. The fairy tale wedding was turning into a full-blown business scandal. We should take this somewhere private, I suggested. Maybe one of the hotel's conference rooms. My team has a transition plan ready. It's actually pretty generous, all things considered. Richard looked like he was about to explode. You think I'm just going to hand over my company? The company I built from nothing? You don't really have a choice, I said calmly. The shareholders have made their decision. But I'm willing to keep you on in an advisory role, if that interests you. An advisory role? He repeated, stunned. At my own company? My company now, I corrected. Though technically it belongs to the shareholders, and they've lost faith in your leadership. Laura stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Ethan, how could you do this today of all days? How could I? I let out a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. Laura, you left me for this man the day before I secured the funding that changed everything. You shared confidential details about my platform with him. And then you invited me to sit here and watch you marry him. Did you really think I'd just smile and clap? Richard's eyes sharpened. What confidential details, Laura? What is he talking about? A flicker of guilt crossed her face. It wasn't like that, Richard. I just mentioned his project, that's all. You told him enough, I said, that he could fold parts of my technology into his latest analytics platform. Not enough to copy it completely, but enough that any decent lawyer should have flagged it. Richard turned back to her. Is that true? Maybe I described a few things, but I didn't think. You didn't think it mattered, I finished for her. Because I was just some small-time programmer with big dreams, right? A nobody from a small town in Florida who wasn't going anywhere. The color drained from her face. That's not fair. Life usually isn't. I adjusted my tie. Now if you'll excuse me, I should go mingle with my new board members. We've got a lot to discuss about the future of Stanton, or I guess Miller Hale Enterprises. As I turned to leave, Laura grabbed my arm. Ethan, wait. Can we talk? Privately? I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. I think we've already said everything. Please, she said quietly. 5 minutes. Richard was already being pulled away by his frantic team, too caught up in the crisis to notice his bride slipping off with me. I followed Laura out to a small balcony just off the main ballroom. The New York skyline stretched out in front of us, lights flickering in the early evening. Say what you need to say, I told her, keeping a bit of distance. Laura took a slow, steady breath. I'm sorry for how things ended between us, for what I said that day. Which part? I asked. The part where you called me a failure? Or the part where you broke my trust by sharing my work with your new boyfriend? She flinched. All of it. I was unhappy, Ethan. I felt stuck in a life that wasn't going anywhere. And now, I asked, are you happy with the life you chose? She glanced back toward the reception, where everything was still unraveling. I thought I was. Until the money and power were at risk, I said quietly. Funny how that works. That's not fair. I didn't marry Richard for his money. I raised an eyebrow. Not just for his money, she corrected a little softer. He was stable, established. He knew what he wanted and how to get it. And I didn't. You had dreams, Ethan. Beautiful dreams. But dreams don't pay the bills. I gestured to myself. Does this look like a dream to you? Carter Analytics is valued at over $1 billion. We've got 300 employees, and now we own Hale Enterprises. She looked at me differently now, like she was seeing me for the first time. I didn't think it would happen this fast. When I heard your company was doing well, I don't know what I thought. That I'd had some moderate success? I said. That I finally got my little project off the ground? I shook my head. You never really believed in me, Laura. That's not true, she said quickly. I supported you for years, until something better showed up. I leaned back against the railing. Why did you invite me to the wedding? The real reason. She looked away. I don't know. Maybe I wanted you to see that I was happy. Maybe I needed closure. Or maybe you wanted to show off your new life. I said, prove to yourself you made the right choice. She hesitated. Maybe. I didn't expect this, she added, motioning vaguely toward the chaos inside. What happens now, Ethan? Now Richard has two options. He can fight a losing battle to hold on to his company, or he can accept my transition offer and walk away with at least some dignity. And us? She asked quietly. What about us? There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Real vulnerability. I studied her for a second. The woman I once loved more than anything. The one who broke me and, in a way, pushed me to become who I am now. There is no us, Laura. There hasn't been for a long time. But there could be, she said, stepping closer. We could try again. Things are different now. You're different. I let out a short breath, almost a laugh. You got married about an hour ago. Marriages can be undone, she said quickly. Richard and I. It's complicated. And now, after everything. Let me get this straight. I cut in. You want to get back together now that I'm successful? Now that I have money and power? Her face flushed. That's not fair. I always cared about you, Ethan. We have history. History isn't enough. I straightened up. You know what I realized after you left? I deserve someone who believes in me when things are hard. Someone who sees what I could be, even when I couldn't see it myself. I made a mistake, she whispered. We all do, I said, nodding once. And then we live with them. I could see the desperation creeping into her expression now. She was starting to understand I wasn't going to offer her a way out. What am I supposed to do? She asked. Go back in there and pretend everything's fine while my husband's company falls apart? That's your decision. I started toward the door, then paused. But if I were you, I'd start thinking about a prenup. Richard's net worth just took a serious hit. You're enjoying this, she said, her voice tight, watching us fall apart. No, I said honestly. I thought I would, but I don't. I met her eyes. I just feel free. Tears filled her eyes. I never meant to hurt you, Ethan. I just wanted more than what we had. And now you've got more than you expected, I replied quietly. Goodbye, Laura. I walked back into the reception and found it in complete disarray. Richard was nowhere in sight. Probably pulled into an emergency meeting with his lawyers. Guests were already leaving in waves. The celebration was basically over. Sophie Bennett met me near the bar. Mission accomplished? I gave a small nod. Let's go. As we headed toward the exit, a sudden commotion near the gift table made me stop. Richard had come back, his face flushed, part anger, part alcohol. Miller, he shouted, pointing straight at me. You think this is over? You think you've won? The remaining guests turned to look as he came toward me, his steps unsteady. Richard, Laura said, reaching for his arm. Not here. Let's go. He shook her off. No, I want everyone to know what kind of man he is. The kind who would ruin a wedding out of spite. I stood my ground as he got closer. I think you've had enough champagne, Richard. Why don't you listen to your wife? My wife? He said with a bitter laugh. The woman who was so impressed by your little computer program that she couldn't wait to tell me all about it. He turned to Laura. Did you know he was planning this? Were you part of it? What? No. Laura looked shocked. Richard, please. Because it seems pretty convenient, he went on. You leave him. Tell me about his project. And then suddenly he shows up a billionaire and takes my company. The accusation hung in the air. Several guests gasped. That's enough, I said firmly. You're embarrassing yourself and your bride. You don't get to tell me what's enough. Richard suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my lapels. You've taken everything from me. Security was already moving in. But before they could step in, Richard lashed out impulsively, shoving me hard enough to make me stumble. The impact surprised me more than it hurt. He was clearly not in control to put much strength behind it. I stumbled back, but stayed on my feet. The room went quiet. "Feel better?" I asked quietly, straightening my tie. Richard stood there, breathing hard, like the fight had left him. 2 security guards grabbed his arms. "Don't worry," I told them. "I won't press charges. This is wedding day after all." Laura rushed to his side, her face full of embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she said, though it wasn't clear who she meant. "Take care of your husband, Laura," I said. "He's going to need you." As Sophie Bennett and I walked out, the whispers followed us. By morning, the story would be all over the business press. The wedding day takeover, followed by the groom's public meltdown. Was it worth it? Sophie Bennett asked as our car pulled away from the plaza. I touched my jaw, already starting to ache. Every single second. The fallout was quick and unforgiving. By Monday morning, Victor Hale had been officially removed as CEO of what was now Miller Hale Enterprises. The board voted unanimously, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Richard's downfall was dramatic. His harsh interviews on financial networks only made him look worse, unsteady, angry, out of control. His accusations grew more desperate by the day. Within months, his reputation was ruined, his social circle disappeared, and his other business interests started to fall apart. The last I heard, he had retreated to his house in a luxury coastal property, drinking heavily and refusing visitors. Laura filed for divorce 3 months after the wedding. The prenup she signed limited what she received, and without Richard's wealth, she vanished from the social scene entirely. Rumor had it she moved back to her hometown, her dreams of status and luxury completely broken. As for me, Miller Hale Enterprises grew beyond anything I expected. The predictive analytics platform that started in my small apartment ended up changing how businesses operated around the world. The company that nearly died in my small town in Florida apartment now employed thousands. Sometimes, I'd get messages from Laura, apologies, attempts to reconnect, even requests for help. I never answered. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. At my next board meeting, someone asked if we would ever drop Stanton from the company name. "Never," I said with a slight smile. "It's important to remember where we came from and where some people ended up."